We interrupt this program. This is a national emergency. Important instructions will follow.
Hello everybody, welcome back to a new video. So in today's episode, I'm going to be deviating from my normal videos to create a PSA of sorts, or a public service announcement for short. So as many of you may know, the tensions in Europe that are currently going on are rising. While the conflict between Russia and Ukraine hasn't necessarily expanded outside of their own respective borders yet, it may be coming sooner than you think, and it's important to stay informed. For example, if you live in the United States, you would have around 30 minutes to prepare for a nuclear attack. However, if you live in Europe, you're basically on your own, and there's not much that can be done for you, as you are not very far from the imminent danger. However, here in the United States, if there were to be a nuclear attack, you would likely have around a 30-minute warning. That is because of the great distance between our nation and other powers at play. China and Russia alike are tens of thousands of miles nearly from our own shores, so we are able to respond and react accordingly. Now, what is the first thing that you should do in the case of a nuclear attack? Well, first of all, it may occur at any time. Now this is because, according to the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, within the next 40 years, the chance of a nuclear attack on any country or anywhere in the world is around 1%. However, despite this low probability, we still need to take the account of a nuclear war occurring very seriously, because it is a threat that we merely cannot avoid at this point. Now, through strategic diplomacy, we may be able to avoid it for thousands of years even. However, within 8,000 years, the chance of a nuclear war becomes around 99%, which means that it's inevitable nearly. According to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the Doomsday Clock currently is at around 100 seconds until midnight. For many of you out there, you may not know what that actually means. However, in 1948, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists led by Albert Einstein founded the Doomsday Clock. This was just to initialize and predict the threat of a nuclear war occurring. It was relatively low during the Cold War, however, it was never nearly as close as it is now. It is 100 seconds until midnight. Leaders around the world must immediately commit themselves to renewed cooperation in the many ways and venues available for reducing existential risk. Citizens of the world can and should organize to demand that their leaders do so, and quickly. Despite what you may think, the United States is currently incapable of shooting down ballistic missiles. While it may be able to do so with some very, very good accuracy and luck, there are measures that enemy nations have procured to prevent the United States from being able to track nuclear missiles. This includes the releasing of highly reflective chaff that occurs when the missile is at its terminal point. Now, this is terrifying because we will not be able to defend ourselves. So what can you do? Now, if you live in a major metropolitan area, say New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Diego, Houston, Miami, or anywhere in between, your chances of getting caught up in a nuclear attack are relatively high. Now, unfortunately, this is because of the extreme and important value that these cities currently hold with the United States government. They provide much revenue and house many civilians. Now, if these cities were to be attacked, it would absolutely cripple the nation's ability to communicate with itself and to send supply or aid or anything else like that. Now, this means that they are very important and high priority targets for enemy nations. However, even if you don't live in major cities, you are still at risk. If you live in the American Midwest, say Kansas, Idaho, or Washington, or any sort of state like that in the North Midwest, you are at a greater risk because of the nuclear silos and military bases that are strategically located in these areas, and they are relatively secluded from urban populations. However, this does not mean that there is nobody who lives near these points. There are many cities that are located near nuclear silos, say Amarillo, Texas, Abilene, Kansas City, both Kansas cities actually, Missouri and Kansas. So if you live in these areas, then you are at a greater risk. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union both possessed much greater weapons stockpiles than they do now, thanks to the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty that was signed by the senior Bush administration in the 1990s. The strategic numbers of nuclear warheads were greatly reduced to what they are now. Today, the United States deploys around 1,357 warheads, while Russia deploys around 1,456 of them. Now, these numbers aren't completely accurate, however, they are a good indicator of how many weapons they currently possess. Now, here's the part where I actually begin to explain how you could survive a nuclear attack. If you live in a major city, such as New York City, I would not recommend fleeing the immediate area. Now, this would be very dangerous because the exact number of people who would have the same idea as you and try to flee the city in imminent danger. Your smartest move, according to the state and local authorities, would be to get within a sturdy brick or concrete building, preferably one that is made of steel and concrete rebar. Now, if you get in buildings like these, your risk of dying from a nuclear blast are relatively low and are relatively mitigated at the same time. They do not completely protect you though, so stay away from windows and make sure to get to the center of buildings, or in a basement preferably. Now, if you live in the state of Texas like me, unfortunately there are not many basements or underground locations, such as basements or parking garages or stuff like that, unless you live in major cities. Now, unfortunately, if you live in the state of Texas like I do, there are not many underground or basement options that you could go to in the case of a nuclear attack. This is due to the great amount of land that is available for construction work in Texas. That makes it to where people building homes don't really see a need to put basements in them. Now, in this case, your best move would to get to in the middle of a sturdy brick building or concrete building in the nearest or most interior room of the structure. Now, this wouldn't completely protect you, so what you need to do next is very important. If you are able to get into a basement in time, then your best move would be to bring your supplies with you, and in these supplies should include a battery-powered radio, a hand crank radio, canned goods, water, bottled water preferably, or anything in gallon jugs, just as long as it's sealed and you can't get radioactive fallout in it. Now, if you have duct tape and aluminum foil, these tools will also prove great use to you. Now, if you have a mobile device, and you also know about the threat of nuclear weapons, you may also know that during a nuclear detonation, a large amount of electromagnetic interference can occur, which can disable most technology, including mobile phones and cars, and airplanes that are not military grade. So unless you have a military grade vehicle or any sort of communication device, your chances of this happening to you are relatively low. So if you have tinfoil and you want to protect your mobile device from an electromagnetic pulse or an EMP blast, what you need to do is you need to cover the entire surface area of your phone in tinfoil. Around 2 to 3 inches of tinfoil should work, as long as there are no cracks or seals in the tinfoil. Now, what you need to do with the duct tape is you need to cover up any sort of air vents that may be present in the room with you. Now, such as ceiling air vents, what you need to do is you need to tape around the perimeter of the air vent, and then you need to tape strips across to prevent any radioactive fallout from getting in. Now, it is widely known that first, whenever a nuclear detonation occurs, the fallout particles are rather large and don't make their way into many brick or concrete buildings. Now, over time, it is also true that radioactive fallout decays, and the dust may become much smaller. So in this case, you would need to make sure that your air vents are covered up so radioactive fallout doesn't get ventilated into the room with you, which if you wouldn't know, that would be very bad for you and your family. After the threat of the Cold War and nuclear annihilation in the United States ended with the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Soviet Union, most fallout shelters were discontinued in an effort to save on spending and budgets. So according to these budget cuts, radioactive fallout shelters were no longer needed by the populace. So in this case, if you live in a major city, you may still be able to reach a nuclear fallout shelter in time. However, if you live in more rural areas, you may not have this luxury. It is actually a great liability if you do happen to find yourself in a fallout shelter due to the lack of ventilation, and also due to the lack of supplies, due to the supplies not being kept down there anymore. So in this case, you also need to bring a weapon with you, something to defend yourself, because there are bound to be people who this apocalypse drives insane. So it'd be best to arm yourself with any weapon you can find, and also make sure you have plenty of batteries. Once you've procured these essential items and supplies and you make your way down to your fallout shelter or any sort of shelter away from the outside, what you need to do next is you need to wait. That is because immediately after a nuclear detonation, while you may have 10 to 15 minutes to seek shelter from nuclear fallout, this does not mean that even after the fallout stops falling that it won't be safe to go outside. It'll be unsafe to go outside in most areas for around 2 weeks depending on where you live. Now, if you live in the American Midwest, you're probably screwed due to the large amounts of nuclear weapons that would be used on silos and military bases in the area. This means that fallout, according to the trade winds in North America, would bring most of the fallout over the Great Plains and into the Northeast. So in this case, you need to remain in shelter for up to 2 weeks. If you live in more rural areas, you may be able to escape your fallout shelter within 10 days. And it would also be important to bring a shovel with you unless you need to dig yourself out of any rubble. In conclusion, I really hope that none of you watching this video ever have to use this advice. However, if you do, it is important to remember that information is the greatest tool that you can use. And while many countries may not fully inform their public of the dangers of nuclear attacks, including the United States, it's important to refer to government websites for more information. And it's also important to keep in mind that I did not cover everything that you would need to survive a nuclear attack in this video. There are many more supplies that you may need, including rags and many changes of clothes. Other than that, I hope you guys found this video informative, and that you'll subscribe and like this video for more content in the future like it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.